Welcome to Confessions of a Terrible Leader, where real leaders share the raw truth about the lessons they learned the hard way so you don't have to. Join our host, Layci Nelson, founder of Transcend Leadership Collective and former terrible leader. Every leader can become worthy of being followed if they are willing to put in the work. On this podcast, we share the messy stories and behind-the-scenes reality of what the work actually entails. We welcome you to this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams.
Hello, listeners. Thank you so much for joining us today on Confessions of a Terrible Leader. We have an outstanding guest. I am so excited to introduce you to George Bryant. If you do not already know who this man is, you can find him on the Mind of George podcast, and I will give you a brief introduction and then let him fill in the blanks. There is so much to his story, but here's the synopsis. He, early in his career, just skyrocketed his success, bestseller, massive levels of success by anyone's account, realized along his journey that he was out of integrity with himself and gave it all up, sold it all for $1, walked away, collected himself, did a lot of really hard work, came back, and is now helping entrepreneurs, business owners, helping people learn how to implement and develop, nurture an outstanding customer journey. There's more to him than that. I want you to really understand this piece about George. First of all, I found you cold and was completely sucked in as soon as I heard relationships beat algorithms, just his tagline. And it did its job. It sucked me right in and very much in alignment with our values and who we are. And George does an excellent job of helping us understand how to build those relationships. And what I appreciate probably the most, just where I'm at in my journey right now, is his ability to speak truth to entrepreneurs to really help us step into the highest version of self-awareness that is possible, to then, for the purpose of being capable to light that path and have the highest level of impact to guide our clients and our customers home so they can receive the gifts we have to give them. All right, George, how'd I do? What did I leave out?
You did pretty good, right? Like I normally say that I'm only successful because I'm stupid. And so your summary is really spot on and better, and I'll speak to it quickly because it's funny, the part that you hit about had all the success and then realized was out of integrity and then sold it for $1. I didn't. I actually gave it away in 24 hours and then deleted my social media, changed my phone number. But I'm going through that process again and have been for like the last 6 months. And it's been really interesting reflecting on my journey as an entrepreneur and knowing that this is a leadership podcast. I'm assuming we're going to get into this anyways, but it's really now funny to look back at all those moments thinking I was like, oh, I made it. Oh, there it is, right? Like, oh, I got the lesson, right? Like, boom, it's in the library. And then I always knew, but convinced myself another dragon didn't appear for another hero's journey after I came and taught the lesson. And it's really interesting because you did nail it, right? Like to give everybody a 2-minute elevator pitch, like pretty rough childhood of like drugs around, social drug abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, right? Pretty much like homeless at 13. But knew at an early age, and this is a weird thing to say, and I still have yet in 10,000 podcasts figure out how to articulate this one. But there was this like knowing in me as a kid when things were really bad, like my parents were dark in their addictions and social services was involved and like it was dark. But there was this like thing in me that like never felt called to like ill behavior or behavior that could like cause me damage or behavior like my parents. And I never knew, but like I always just felt like I didn't belong there. There was just a part of me that felt like I had to get out. And that's a weird thing to say, but I always kind of like had that. And so I didn't know what that looked like, and everything was survival. So I was like, I'm going to join the Marine Corps. So I, forged my parents' signature and then went and spent 13 years of my life as Uncle Sam's mobile carnival, pawn on a chessboard, getting broken down and battered. And so, entrepreneurship was an accident for me. It wasn't something I set out. My goal was 30 years in the Marine Corps, and I hit 13, and they're like, hey, thanks for letting us destroy your body, get blown up a few times, get some traumatic brain injuries, and we're medically separating you, no retirement, and have a nice life, right? And I kind of accidentally found paleo to heal my bulimia, which led me to creating a Facebook page because I needed accountability. And so I made a fake college email address back in 2010, which means I had to make a fake college email server to make Bryant University, not the Rhode Island one, the other one, mine. And so I could get a Facebook account, and then I just started posting my recipes on Facebook to hold myself accountable. I would like cook a recipe and tell a story, and I would eat that way. And so that's how I was curing my bulimia, basically. And then eventually someone's like, you should start a blog. And so it was all kind of accidental, right? Like all of it was, and everything has been self-taught. And then, like if you look at it on paper, I went from being a Marine to being an entrepreneur. And my first ever year as an entrepreneur, I made $1 million. Like my first ever digital product, right? Like boom, boom, boom. And then 2 years later, I was a New York Times bestselling cookbook author 22 weeks in a row, and everybody said I couldn't do it. And I did it all organically. And then I made an app and hit #1 in the world. And all while everybody was celebrating me, I was just being celebrated in an addiction because my family life, my happiness was miserable. And it was like everybody talks shit about. It was everything you see on the internet is not real. And I was like a living contradiction. I was just out of integrity. And so, I walked away from all of it and kind of accidentally became a consultant. But, the lessons through all of it were like the only reason I won as an entrepreneur was because in the very beginning, when I started the blog, I was like, well, if somebody takes the time to comment, I need to write back because they're writing in my house. And I kept that rule from day one, and I've never let it go. And it's been, 13 years, 14 years of doing that. And I look back at like the things that I just accidentally did in the beginning, not because they were a tactic or a strategy. They were because how I would want to be treated as a customer, or if I was paying attention to somebody. And it's interesting to see the through line now from 2009 to 2023 and what I've accomplished now in scaling multiple companies up to $1 billion. I own multiple of my own. They all do high 7, 8, 9 figures, right? And seeing the principles that were kind of just a part of like what I thought to be the right way carry themselves all the way through to now. But now they're things that we build models around and I teach people. And, that brings me to today, which is like how I even got to now. The things that I talk about with customer journey, with leadership, with resiliency, with self-awareness, with mindset, don't come because I'm like, hey, you should or shouldn't do this. I don't care. They come from, hey, I made this mistake and I smashed my face against that wall numerous times because I've lived many, many lifetimes. Many, many lifetimes. And so, hey, just take it as an invitation to realize that like this is a game of like us versus us. And it's a consistent game over and over. And leadership happens in the mirror. And that's where it starts, right? And I think that like I say that because I didn't come up in this game doing it all right. Like nobody guided me, nobody mentored me, and the people that I found weren't the best internet marketers. They were the upsellers, the downsellers, the transactors. And then I fell into that world and I became so transactional that it basically shut me down, because the reason I walked away from that business wasn't because I had this conscious decision. It's because I subconsciously drove it into the ground. And I was like avoiding it and moving away from it and further and digging up the expenses. And then it was just like, I got to a point where I didn't have the courage to do it. So I forced it on myself. Right. And it was like, I made a lot of mistakes. I've made many of them. And now on the other side, it's just understanding that the moment you have the awareness, you've won the game. The rest of it The rest of it is choosing to flex the muscle you now know exists
Mm-hmm.
when your body, your brain, and the world is telling you to flex the old one.
Yes. So I want to back up a little bit.
Go for it. I tried to
You,
keep that as short as I could to
no, it was
cram as much in.
great.
Okay.
It was great. And it's really good context for people listening. And
Okay.
if you haven't found George, go find him because you will love it. But I wanted to tie that into what you had said earlier about you're personally, like in the last 6 months, realizing, okay, I thought I slayed the dragon. I thought I learned the lesson. I moved on, but oh, look, that dragon it wasn't dead. It just went and maybe put on some new scales or reinvented
Well,
itself.
it's a new one. It's a new one, right? Like
Okay.
it's a new one, right? Like it's the thing. Like if anybody's ever not familiar with the hero's journey, like get familiar with the hero's journey,
Yes.
right? But the funny thing is, and I think most entrepreneurs, most humans, most anybody who's some level of like self-awareness falls
Mhm.
into this trap, right?
Mhm.
If you've ever slayed some challenging thing in your life, right, faced with resistance, right, you
Right.
remember these moments where you were so convinced in that moment, like your life was over. There was no way you were going to get out of it. There was no
Mhm.
blank, right?
Mhm.
But if I asked you about that moment right now, you probably couldn't even remember it and tell me what it was. And it would feel so easy right now, right? And
Mhm.
that's the slaying the dragon moment, right? And
Yes.
that's what everybody teaches with the hero's journey. The part that they miss about it is after the person slays the dragon, they have to return to the village to teach the lesson.
Yes.
And that's the integration part. That's the building new habits and behaviors around that dragon that you just slayed and conquered to keep it at bay, right?
Yeah.
And so you have it. So my analogy is like, I call them shadows or cups. I give them cups of coffee, right? I'm like, hey, take a cup of coffee and sit the fuck down, right?
Yeah.
I know you're there. It's good to see you, right? Glad to know that you're still giving me contrast.
Yes. Mhm.
And you look the same, not have to worry about it. If I find a different flavor of you, I will give him a cup of coffee too. But
Okay.
once that tool goes in your toolbox,
Yeah.
right? Like once you go race that race that you've been working on for a year and you get a result, the same level of training that got you that result will actually slow you down next year. So you have to adjust your
Right.
training.
Right.
Or else you atrophy and go backwards. And so in the lens of this game, I've been really bullish on mindset lately, and it's because every person in my life right now, and I mean this, at every level is in the middle of some storm.
Mhm.
And it is happening across the board.
Mhm.
And it's been this resounding same thing. And here's the game. And I'll summarize it one of two ways. My buddy Alex Sharfin says, you don't have the business you want because you haven't become the person to run it yet.
Yes.
Or, I forgot the guy's name, some billionaire's name I couldn't pronounce the other day. He said, your bank account will never surpass your level of personal development.
Yep.
And so when we think about this game, and this is in the lens of leadership around that dragon thing, no matter what position we're in, whether we're in a company, we own our company, we have one person underneath us, 12 people underneath us, our job is to be as aware of our situation as possible, as much as possible. And with that awareness, choose a behavior or an action that's aligned with where we want to go, mitigating all the noise, to put it consistently into practice or into behavior, right? Like that is ultimately the goal of like what we're doing. And so when we really, really boil down to it, like our job is to have as much awareness as possible. And what ends up happening is that we'll get in situations with noise and distraction, and this gets shut down, and this gets shut down, and this gets shut down, right? And all that shit, for lack of better terms, piles up and filters our awareness away and makes us reactive to the things around us. Right. And so like the goal is to be able to pause as much as possible and be like current state. Oh, what tools do I have in the toolbox?
Yeah.
And that's the game that the dragons play, because one of two things happens. You're like, oh, I've seen this before. I have a tool. Let's try this tool. Or shit, this is new. he's never had a cup of coffee before. Let's figure out
Yes.
what this one is, right? And I think that's a part of the game now, because like my friends and I were joking on a podcast the other day, because in that analogy of the triage nurse, I'll use like a check engine light in a car, right? I think most leaders lose because they see the check engine light and ignore it rather than just reading the message and then making a decision, right?
Yeah.
It's like you get the tilt that something's off, but you don't go check on it, or you see the message and you're like, I just won't open it, right? Like, so you literally see the light come on and then you just assume it's nothing because you don't want to look at it because it's triggering you. But the thing is that looking is really where you win the game. Because if I look and it's like, oh, my windshield wiper fluid's low, I'm like, great, I can floor it and keep going. If I look and it's like, hey, my engine's seizing, I'm like, fuck, I need to pull over for a minute. Right.
You got to figure out which bucket, so to speak, is the one that needs the attention.
You gotta. So like the analogy now, and it's funny, is like I look at like, you know, one of my mentors, he's responsible for 77 gold medals at the Olympics. His name's Jeff Spencer, right? He is the best mindset performance coach. He was an Olympian himself. Like the guy's absolutely incredible, to the point like every time I bring up his name, I like forget what I was going to say in my train of thought, because I was like, I'm just in awe of this man.
Buckets. We're talking about buckets.
Yeah, no, we were talking about what bucket to go in. What was I saying now?
So you were saying when that check engine light comes on.
Oh, that's what it was. The check engine light, right? So we were talking and he was telling me about this and understanding, like, if you think about the world's greats, right? If you think about how you've succeeded in life, if you think about the early stages of your success, or figuring out a hobby or doing any of those things, one of the things that we do in the very beginning to win is we break things a lot on purpose. We try a lot of new things and then learn the evidence and then start adjusting as we go, right? And that's one of the things that we stop doing once things start working, right? And they start getting comfortable. And so like, for me, it's funny now, because the joke used to be like, oh, I used to live my life with check engine lights, right? Like emotional triggers, personal triggers. And then we're like, now what? I'm like, now I wake up and I floor my car into the wall as fast as possible and I make as many as I can find, right?
Yeah.
And like, that's where the other side of it comes, where it's like, when you get to this place of like, oh, this is good or this is working, then it's time to start stretching, right? And that's where that like intentional hero's journey comes in, of like pursuing like a good book that I love recommending is The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. I absolutely love that book, but I think that that's a big part of it. So I don't know. Those were just my thoughts on that.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So are you saying, like, in your experience, do you ever stop meeting new dragons?
No, that's death.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so I'm normal, that I always have dragons.
Everybody is, but here's the problem. We never used to have a problem with that. We weren't so addicted to comfort and hiding from our feelings and emotions. Like, let's look at it and call it for what it is right now. If somebody doesn't feel good right now, the first thing that happens is the phone comes out. Dopamine gets inserted or numbed, right? Because I can't feel my own feelings, right? Like this, like post-industrial revolution, when like comfort was existed everywhere, to like, I don't have to drive anywhere, walk anywhere, I'm never cold, I'm never warm.
Yeah.
You know, like we've kind of lost this muscle, this relationship with like resiliency, right? Like in every ounce of shape or form. And I think it's a really big problem.
Yeah.
Personally, because if you think about, you know, like any level of success in anything, it requires that you work at it. And it's funny for people that work out. It's like, if you're committed to doing a 5-mile run and you hit mile 4 and you're tired and you set a goal, when that hurts, you celebrate it and use it. But yet when you do it in leadership, you're like, I don't want to do it anymore. And I was like, hey, listen, when you pick the game, you get to play by the rules. It doesn't mean you have to love them, but you agreed to play the game. And the secret to winning the game is to love the rules while playing the game, even if you don't like them.
Yeah. And learning to embrace the suck, going into the pain cave and sitting there when you have to.
Well, and like
not running from it.
And it's a default thing, right? Like no matter which way you slice it, the the deep-rooted challenge in success is that it's so simple, it's boring.
Yeah.
That's where people lose the game.
This is true.
If you think about bodybuilding, if you think about fitness goals, if you think about weight loss, if you think about any long-term goal, the game is literally monotony and consistency.
Yes.
That come from intentionality. And the challenge is when the emotions come and you don't feel like it, it's doing that thing because it's a guaranteed path, right? And
right. I just posted on my Instagram yesterday about, so I love fitness. I'm always chasing a fitness goal. And one of the things that happened during COVID in my life is I transitioned from working out in a gym for most of my health journey to working out at home in my driveway and having nobody tell me that I had to get out there and do it. I didn't have a coach at me anymore. I had to just get motivated and do it.
Changes the game.
Yes, it does. And we also live in a place that has a lot of weather. We have all 4 seasons, and we have them.
Yes, you do.
Dramatically as Montana, but
no, but you get them though. You get them.
Yeah, it's not sunny, southern, temperate, beautiful California when it's not on fire. But it's not those. It's not that. We have heat, we have cold, and so I have had to learn how to. One of the best things that has come out of that experience for me and connecting it to my mental toughness and my development is I will completely admit until probably 2 years ago, was a total fair weather princess, right? Like if it's too cold, I don't want to be outside. I don't hate being cold. If it's too hot, like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. And moving everything outside and knowing if I don't learn how to fitness outside, literally in my driveway, our garage is like, we have a 1924 house. Like our garage is not built for exercising in. We keep our bikes in it. That's it. So, it was like, I've got to get over this and just lean into it. And I went from feeling like I was just surviving the workouts in the driveway to thriving on the evidence that I could not just adapt, but like go out and kick ass when it's 98 degrees or when it's 17 degrees. And I'm going to get out there and do it anyway.
Evidence is the secret.
Tell me more about that.
Evidence is the secret because people wait for motivation. Motivation comes with evidence. Evidence comes from intentional, aligned action, irregardless of how you feel. That's the end. And the way and the reason, and listen, I know why I lose the game or lost the game for so long. Like, I'm a very intense individual. Very intense, right? Like, I do not hide it, and it's on both swings of the spectrum. Like, you give me a goal, it's game over, but if you open up my heart and we start crying together, it's the same way, right? It's this whole thing, and I lost for a long time because I was so rigid and so black and white about the intensity. If it didn't look a certain way, it just didn't happen. If it wasn't that way, it just didn't happen. It was to a point where, most of my journey in my life, I'm blessed to have had incredible people that have come across my path to help me. But every traditional method did not help me with the PTSD, the depression, the suicide, the addictions. Like, it was all these other things. And in that process, I was blessed to meet incredible people that like helped me find things. And I made models for myself. Like, that's where a lot of my models came from that I teach now. Were ones that I used for me. To heal. And the one model, and I swear this one model, and I can explain it in 1 minute. This one model is the one reason that I and most of my clients will forever be successful, because once everybody gets this, it changes the game. Because when you don't do it, it comes down to a matter of, well, there's only one of 2 reasons why I'm not doing it. Number 1 is I really don't want what's on the other side. Or number 2 is I'm choosing not to, and I can't say I want it anymore. Right? Well, and so when you get down to the root of it, it was this. And if you think of any behavior, like, we'll take physical fitness because it's easy, is like, everybody knows, like, you need to take care of your body. Everybody should walk. Everybody should get outside 20 minutes a day. every single person I know in a leadership position has some semblance of awareness or focus on physical fitness, as they should, right? And so if you think about it, it's like, okay, cool. When you think about most people's fitness journeys, they're like, all right, cool. What's my dream? I'm going to go to the gym 3 days a week, an hour a week, boom, boom, boom. And what ends up happening? 2 of the days they go, 1 day meetings go over, they miss it. They only have 45 minutes. So instead of going for 45 minutes, they don't go at all.
Yep.
They break the habit and routine, and then it becomes this sparse intermixed thing, right? And so I was having the same thing. And so I had to start pushing myself. So this is how this came to be. I really, I'm only 5'7", and at my heaviest, I was 270 pounds. Like I'm 170 now, right? And my weight has always been an emotional ride. And after my son was born, it was bad. And I was like, I need to fix this. And I was like, but I can't do this intensely because as a father, it changed me.
Yeah.
And so here's how I did it. I made a commitment that I was going to wake up every day and go to the gym, and I would be at the gym by 5 a.m. But that was my goal. It was not to go in the gym. It was to park my car in the parking lot by 5 a.m. every single day.
Yeah.
So I made a model called the wedge of expectations. And so you pick a behavior that's important to you, that's guaranteed if you can do it every day, it will get you closer to your goal or to your goal. I don't care what it is, but pick physical fitness, pick reading, pick working on your novel. I don't give a shit. Pick something, but I'm going to use fitness as an example. And you ask yourself 2 questions. So if you're like, okay, physical fitness is important to me, I'm like, great. If you're thinking about your dream day and your ideal day, how long would you work out? And they're like, typically an hour. I'm like, great, what would you do? And they're like, oh, I'll do an hour at the gym and try. I'm like, awesome, cool. And I was like, amazing, that's the easiest one, right? And I was like, now on your worst day, I want you to imagine you walked out of the house, your dog got run over by a car, somebody slashed all 4 of your tires, your business partner stole your wife and your business, and you were left in the house with your 2 kids and realized in that moment it was all gone, but you still weren't going to quit and you weren't going to die on that day. Knowing that you're the only one who can change it, what's the minimum you can commit to knowing that that goal is the only path that's going to give you evidence to get you out on that day? What's the minimum? That's called the floor. And so typically I get people to a minimum of about 10 minutes or so, right? So if you think about my fitness goal, my dream day is 2 workouts a day. It's an hour walk outside in nature in the morning, right? And then an hour of lifting or some fun activity, right?
Yeah.
My floor is 15 minutes walking outside irregardless of weather.
Yes.
And it's in purpose irregardless of weather, which means I made a commitment to myself for the rest of my life, as that's my current goal, that every single day, no matter what, I will at least hit my floor. And so for every behavior that I have, and I do this with my clients, I do this with my podcast in my business. And so in my ideal week, I have 2 shows drop a week. So my dream week is record 5 podcasts. My floor is record 2.
Yeah.
And here's what's funny. Underneath my record 2, I have a floor and a ceiling if I'm having emotional days or I'm off. And underneath it, I have ceilings of write 3 bulleted outlines and the title so that when I feel better, all I do is open and record. So like this model, I use everywhere to protect consistency, but that's the name of the game. So the evidence piece is the most important part. And in the lens of leadership, when it really boils down, our example and our state of being is the most powerful part. And our job is to always be flexing our muscles and getting stronger so we can turn around and give it to the people that are next to us in our team, in our community, with our customers, and like kind of keep going that way. So that's what I mean by evidence, right? And like there's some incredible authors and things out there like Benjamin Hardy, Nicole LaPera, Andrew Huberman, like go find them. But like here's the point. I'll summarize it in a fortune cookie. You can either think about it or you can build it, but no bricks get put into place when you're thinking about it.
Right.
And it like at the end of the day, like I think about the amount of times I've sat in this chair after like 8 hours of podcasts and I'm like, oh, I'm so tired. It was such a good day. I crushed all those podcasts. Like, I burnt enough calories. Like I don't need to go to the gym. And I was like, what am I going to do? Sit in this chair? And like my office by design is at the base of the mountain. Like it's right there. Yeah. And so I walk out my door and there's a walking path. And I was like, out the door, hit the floor. Right. Yeah. And then of course, what ends up happening is I get 10 minutes into the floor and am I only going to walk for 15 minutes? No.
You're in it now.
No,
Yeah.
I went and ran up the fucking mountain.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And I was like, yeah, I'm so glad I did those podcasts. And then I slept like a baby, right? Like,
yep, been there.
And tears came out, right? And laughter came out, right?
Yes.
And it's those moments, and I feel like it's just really, really, really important to remember. And at the deepest part, and I know you didn't ask this, but I'll say it anyways. I think for me, the reason I struggled so much with most of it was because I struggled to just be with myself. Like to really just be with myself, like without the label of work, without what I'm leading, without what people need from me. Like, who am I?
Yeah.
Without this podcast interview,
Right.
Like, who am I when everything gets deleted? Am I okay with that? Right. And so another tool for everybody. And this is one you've heard me talk about before because I'm bullish on it. But my joke is, if you ever want to see a room full of millionaires scatter like cockroaches, this is how to do it, right? And this is why. So I had a room full of millionaires at one of my events, 100 of them, and I made them all blindly commit to this practice before lunch. I'm like, hey, listen, I guarantee you that I'm going to give you a practice, and it's a workout that you can do in 10 minutes a day every day. And if you do it for 30 days every day, I guarantee you your business will grow. Like, guaranteed. When I give it to you, you're going to do it alone. It'll take you 10 minutes. It doesn't require anything. Nobody will witness it. Nobody will do anything. Everybody like blindly commit. Everybody says yes. They're like, all right, cool. I'm like, but here's the rule. The moment I brief it, when I'm done, there's no questions. It's crystal clear. You can't ask any questions. There's no anything. And they're like, yeah, we got it, right? I'm like, cool, awesome. Yep. I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm like, all right, Layci, here's the exercise. When we go to lunch, you're going to go do a stillness practice. You're going to go find a spot away from people.
Yep.
No phone, no notebook, no pen, no agenda. The only thing you're allowed to have is a timer. And you're going to go sit still for a minimum of 10 minutes, but a maximum of 30. And here's the thing. You can't remember anything. You can't write anything down. And if you find yourself ruminating on a thought, you have to find something in front of you. And I swear to fucking God, 50% of the hands go like, and they're like, but what if I have an idea? And what if I and it turns into a ruckus.
Yes.
And I get them all settled. And I was like, I just want you guys to realize how averse you are to being with the one person you're guaranteed to spend the rest of your life with.
Yes.
And one of the wisest pieces of advice I ever heard, and this is the best leadership advice I could ever give anybody, came from a shaman in Costa Rica. And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, your biggest challenge is you're never quiet enough to hear God's whispers. And replace God with intuition, soul, source. But think about physical fitness for you and think about all those moments where you were having a bad day, got into a run or a hike or a walk or a workout, and 20 minutes in had the most clarity that you've ever had because you went into it in silence and allowed yourself the space to feel your emotions.
Thanks for being part of this community of revolutionary leaders who believe honest communication, healthy conflict, and building cultures of acceptance, respect, and trust are not only possible, but non-negotiable for cultivating world-class teams. If one-to-one coaching, engaging workshops, or strategic planning that is actually useful are anything that interests you, make sure to head over to www.transcendleadershipcollective.com to check out our free resources. Confessions of a Terrible Leader is hosted by Layci Nelson and produced by Mary Scott. Music is by Leif Olson and Mary Scott from the band The Number of Months. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, go manage like a leader.